and thank you for joining us to our first Enterprise and Innovation Working Group event. So I'm very excited to introduce to you today our first in the series of AI last month seminars that are focused on the practical applications of artificial intelligence. So looking at more of the specifics, and we start from a personal perspective. I'll introduce John Bethel, who is leading the panel today, and I'll let him introduce then his panelists. But welcome. I hope you find this session useful and informative, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. Other than that, John, please.
Thank you, Patrick, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to AI Last Month, where we talk about real AI, AI that's actually happening and the practicalities of how we make it happen. And today is how to get you started. We circulated a one-page framework yesterday. This framework outlines three main blocks that people face when they're starting to learn AI, as well as naming 5 breakthrough moments people need to experience to actually learn. Today, we're not going to teach that framework. We've simply applied it directly to the 3 case studies that we're about to hear. So in these case studies, we're going to be talking about the actual blocks that were faced and the actual breakthrough moments that panelists experienced. My right to be here? Well, each of the panelists and between the 4 of us, I think we did a quick count, and there's well over 20 years experience of actually doing AI, which in AI terms might as well be forever. And that includes not just the generative, the new kid on the block, the generative AI, which is the stuff that we're going to be talking about most today, but also machine learning. So practical practitioners doing AI over a long period of time. A key theme that I think is going to come out of this session doing it. It's a bit like learning to drive a car. You can do your theory tests, and you can do you know, with the sort of driver out on the road. But what really counts is the miles that you have on the clock. You have to learn to play with the traffic, as someone said to me, and you need to move from the planning to the playing, and it's that experience that actually gives you the fundamental insights that you need to progress. So let's meet our panelists. Ed Short, starting off with Ed Short. Ed is head of digital Arch Insurance. He's going to talk about one of the most demanding challenges, which is how he cut through the AI fog and found out what actually worked. I think this is a particularly interesting challenge because I think most of us have totally inundated all the time with emails saying this, that, and everything else. How do you discern what is actually right and works from just fluff? Second is Natalie on the panel is Natalie Stevens. Natalie is a senior data scientist with Apollo, and she's going to show how she avoided being paralyzed by analysis and gave herself permission to be messy. How you don't have to have perfect data, that sometimes in the right circumstances, good enough is good enough. Finally, but not least, we have Jake Iverson, who's a consulting actuary from Oliver Wyman. He's going to show how he's managed risk in the types of projects he's been undertaking while learning AI at the same time. He's going to talk about how you learn in safe places, which I think is going to be a topic that is going to come up quite a bit. How can you give yourself a good place to actually learn about it, where you're not going to threaten your betting the farm on actually doing it. So here's how the next hour is going to work. The first half is going to be about us talking about those 3 cases, and then the second half is your questions. So if you've got any questions, please drop them in the chat as we go along. And we are sort of triaging them, and we'll come up with the ones to add to the panel as we go along. We've had a fair few questions submitted already, but we want lots more. To be clear, we will answer the first questions after all the speakers have spoken. And I will draw the Q&A session to a close by asking each panelist to describe their 3 top moments that provided them with the most insight and learning. We're going to conclude the webinar with our surprise challenge, which we'll more about later, but we're essentially inviting each of you to accept this challenge and then maybe come back in a month's time with the results of that challenge. So without further ado, if I can hand over to Ed Short, whose title of his talk is "How I Cut Through the AI Noise to Find Out What Actually Works for Me." Over to you, Ed.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. So I guess kind of my history with AI in a work context, I've always been kind of, well, not always, I've been intrigued by it for a long time. So I think my first kind of encounter with kind of the wild world of it was when Google's Deep Dream published all these kind of very, very sort of creepy images of their deep learning model kind of finding images within an image, and it kind of created like dogs that were made up of dogs and all that stuff. So kind of since then, I've been kind of a bystander looking at how it works. In terms of professional context, I think my first interaction with it was with IBM's Watson. I ran a pilot back in 2017 where we essentially gave IBM a ton of data and said, just tell us some stuff we don't know. And that was really interesting. And it helped me avoid having a lot of noise, as that was really before kind of everything took off. And I think we're now at a point where I'm not sure if anyone's encountered the Gartner hype cycle, but I think we're at the peak of inflated expectations of referencing the Gartner hype cycle as a way to sound intelligent when talking about AI. And there is so much content, so much noise around it at the moment. So for me, I think, oddly, I'll probably share more of a personal story around this, but the thing with cutting through the noise that really broke through the resistance was just finding a tool that works for me and I kind of interact with it without thinking about it being AI. I just found real utility within it. And obviously kind of there's a little bit of kind of the concept of kind of, if no one really ever wants a hammer, they just want to they just want to like hang a picture up on the wall. And I think sometimes when people are looking for AI, you're wading into noise. Whereas actually for me, it was kind of interacting with an app called Perplexity, which is essentially just a search engine, but it's kind of built on top of loads of or quite a few sort of large language models. And actually it meant that you kind of, rather than just kind of Googling things and kind of sifting through, it actually was a way that it just replaced how I would look for information from a personal basis. And that was the jump that kind of actually got me thinking about kind of how do I interact with this, and kind of understanding the concept that I can be a much more natural in how I ask questions. And then also understanding kind of, this is a different way of interacting with this world. I think what I found that was much more different to the moment that kind of surprised me is just how much more powerful it is. For me, I'm not sure who's had an Alexa or a Google Home or anything like that, but I think a thing that used to be frustrating and actually just searching in Google was kind of the taxonomy and the way you ask the question was so important. And I think the biggest surprise when you engage with these tools is actually you can speak in natural voice. You can ask it very simple questions and very open-ended questions and get a very specific response. And I think that surprise of like, oh, wait, okay, I can have to unlearn how I've engaged with kind of search engines and things like that, and how I engage with just general getting data and getting information and condensing a large thing of large stuff. That's something that's really like genuinely surprised me when I actually integrated it into my sort of day-to-day life. How it clicked was essentially, again, getting my head around of unlearning those things, whereas I was always kind of very good at searching in Google. Like basically, like early on in my career, I think I basically made a career of being really good at asking Google how to do stuff in Excel, and then people thinking I was very good at analytics, and actually I was just very good at Googling Excel stuff. And actually what that means is kind of you have to reframe how you interrogate things and how you interact with it, and actually kind of that broad understanding of that with these tools, you don't have to have organized information, and you can ask very simple questions. And I think that aha, it's like, okay, I can just ask a question. I can give myself, I can ask it to sort of inhabit my role and do things in a way. So in terms of professional terms, it's like something like, oh, I need to have like a new product development framework. So then I can give it a role and say, actually, can you just pretend you work for McKinsey and I want you to pitch me a new product development framework, and I need it to look like this, and I want to be able to put it in into a PowerPoint. And actually suddenly understanding that you can start to interrogate it in a totally different way to how you would before. And that really, really, really made it click, and that can unlock the power for me in terms of how do I integrate it in both my personal and professional life. I think like the filter in terms of spotting what's real and what's not, I think it's relatively simple. I guess the thing that kind of gets confusing is there aren't actually very many companies that are providing the tech, like the actual like physical hardware to run this stuff. Like it's so expensive and it's so big, so data intensive, that actually kind of the filter is really understanding who's productionized it best and how does it integrate in your daily life or your professional life. So working with kind of using Copilot with work, so you've got all the guardrails there, or working out kind of I can use ChatGPT. And actually, I think avoiding the noise of listening to or trying to engage with people who are kind of packaging it up as a service or wrapping their services around it, that's what I discover is real. And then also kind of generally, you can't really avoid it now. So like a story I was telling John the other day, so I wear a kind of a fitness tracker. And in the app, they've just integrated AI into it. So now at the top, I've just got a free text box that I can just quiz it about what's going on with my data that it's collecting. And actually kind of that's a self-filtration process because it's where I'm looking at information and I'm actually just interrogating it all the time. And then the final kind of nudge moment is really kind of, I would encourage everyone to kind of notice where it's there, like it's becoming ubiquitous. So if you've got Copilot installed like in your office or in your professional environment, like actually you'll see it popping up in Windows, so it's not a paperclip anymore. It's it's much more dynamic than that. So notice where it is and try and engage with them, like actually engage with it, and then just be conscious and understand be conscious of how you're engaging with it early, because then you can like once you're consciously engaging with it, you can actually start to reframe how you engage with these tools. And I think that helps you discover what's going on rather than reading output from sales organizations or anything else where they're trying to encourage you to use their service, whereas actually it's such a ubiquitous tool set that you've got multiple things. So that's kind of my journey through the noise and how I cut through it. But John, I'll pass back to you.
Thanks, Ed. That's really really helpful. I mean, it is well, we'll come out in the questions about this is such a vast topic as to how we actually make this. To me, the more I dig into AI and generative AI, I think the more you see you can do with it, and but it is a case of learning as you go along as to what can work and what can't work. And I think one of the tests I apply is when the answer comes back is whether I actually agree with that answer, and you know, whether I want to challenge it. Do I actually feel comfortable signing off on that answer? And I think that's another way to do it. So okay, let's move swiftly on to Natalie. Go for it. Okay, how I stop being paralyzed by AI perfection.
Right, yeah.
No pressure.
I'm Natalie. I'm a data scientist from Apollo. I started using AI pretty much soon after I joined Apollo a couple of years ago. I did have a data science background, but that was before ChatGPT was released, so I didn't have much exposure to it in that way before I joined. And I was quite hesitant to start using it. I was the sort of person I needed to understand everything that it was doing before I wanted to use it. and I just wanted all my code and everything to be 100% mine, and I was very sure of the output and I could explain it really well. But I started to realize that some of my teammates were using it, and they were becoming unblocked a lot quicker than I was, and they were getting through tasks a lot quicker. So I started to question, like, maybe I should try using it, but I was really not sure. So the first time I used it, I was actually building a dashboard, and it has its own coding language in it that I was not familiar with at all. I hadn't seen it before. And I usually, as a data scientist, what you do is you spend hours on Google and online forums trawling through, trying to see if anyone has done the same thing and had the same issue. And I couldn't find anything, so I just thought I'll give it a go. I pasted in some dummy code and I thought, let's see. And it was like instant fix. Like I'd saved hours instantly from just using this. So I thought, okay, maybe I can use it to help me rather than completely take over. And then I started to think, okay, I could use it in a different way. I could, if someone was handing over a piece of work, I could ask it to explain it step by step for me. So I could have confidence that I could make edits to it and I knew what was going on. It felt a bit like a personal tutor. And that sort of built my trust in using it. But I still wasn't very comfortable using it like completely from scratch to generate code or anything. And I actually didn't want people to think I was using AI at work as well. There was this sort of like shame if people saw you were using it, you quickly like close the browser because you'd think, oh, they think you're not really working or you're being lazy or something. But it was actually when I spoke to my manager about this, and I was having an issue. I couldn't work out how to start a project. And he said, oh, have you tried using ChatGPT? And I was like, oh, I'm really not sure. Like, I don't want people to think I'm just using it to take over. And he said, AI won't replace you, but someone who uses it better than you might. And that sort of gave you the permission to be like, okay, fine, I do need to learn how to use it. And it's not about it completely taking over your work. It's, can you use it in a really useful way? So I sort of let go of the idea that it would be taking over and it was cheating. And I started thinking of it as like a skill and like a tool that I needed to get better at using. I remember my first like prompts trying to like generate code, and I did give it like a lot of context. Like it was like big paragraphs of things. And it wasn't like perfect output. And I realized that actually it's better to start small and start with a little idea and then iterate as you learn more about what you actually want as well. Like you often don't know everything that you want from the outset. So I started thinking of it more like a colleague that I could collaborate with and say, I've got this idea, can you give me some more ideas, and then we can sort of work through what steps to go through next. I think that helped me build a lot more trust in the output. I started not thinking the output had to be perfect, but more I could make it perfect collaborating with myself as like a colleague. So that's how I started. And then I also started using it outside of work, and I realized I could also use it in loads of different ways. So for example, I'm moving house at the moment, and I've never done bills before. And I didn't realize there were so many different things I needed to set up. And I asked it for like a checklist, and it can say, can you give me everything I need to set up and all the timelines? And I didn't realize that broadband takes 5 weeks to set up. And that was a really big thing that ChatGPT helped me find out. So that has saved me a lot of headaches as well. But also I think you can start quite small, and you can think about it in like a safe workspace environment. So, when I'm coding, we have a set of coding guidelines that we have to adhere to. It's called PEP8, and we need to do it by that. And often when I was asking it, oh, can you generate this code, it wasn't doing it like that. And I realized I could actually just link in these guidelines to ChatGPT and say, can you write it exactly in this format? And that's also been like a really helpful way, and it's made my code a lot more safe and people can understand it. I can understand it a lot better. We've also got like internal ChatGPT tools now, so there's a lot more confidence, so you can start using, you know, confidential information more safely. And also, I think people don't realize that you can also like ask it if it's correct, and you can get it to check itself. So that I often do that. I'll ask it, can you write me some code? And then can you also check the output is what I expect? I think just like replying to it and saying, are you sure you've done that right? Can you go through these checks for me? Is actually really helpful. So yeah, I think you just have to not expect it to be perfect and just treat it more like a colleague, and then you won't be disappointed and you will have a lot more trust. And if you use it as in collaboration, then you'll know that what you're doing is right. So yeah, I think also if you just try, if you start a bit messy, you'll learn really quickly and you'll get a lot more confidence, and then you'll see how much time you'll save using it. Back to John.
Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, and there's some really interesting points that have come out there. I love this idea of AI as a work colleague, a co-worker. I think that is such a I've certainly found, you know, someone said that to me right early on to me, that, you know, oh, you treat it like a co-worker. But the more you actually look at what the ramifications are of that, the stronger you realize what that co-worker worker thing is, because it has all sorts of ramifications. You know, you can say, well, you know, you are the actuary on this project, you tell me about this thing, and you've got an instant answer from the actuary or the underwriter, and that I think is really really good. I also love that point you made about the stigma about using AI, because I think that is also very true, is that if someone thinks it's been the AI has generated, then they somehow devalue that, but that actually totally undermines the fact of what your Q&A with that AI is actually going to is influencing what is coming out, because it's not a case of accepting what the answer is. You have to actually you have to query it and say, you know, you sure will come back, and that challenging, I think, is part of being with a co-worker. So lots of points there. I'm not seeing many questions coming up in the chat. I don't know whether that's everywhere we're answering all the questions you have in your mind, but I've got to believe there are some questions. If people could feed the questions in as we go along, and there must be some good questions to come out of both of those talks. Now we move on to Jake, who is going to, the title of his talk is How I Demonstrated AI Value Without Getting Fired for the Mistakes. So over to you, Jake.
Thank you ever so much. When this question first got posed to me, I was wondering, well, how best to answer it. So I thought what I would do is take you through a little bit of my journey through AI, and thankfully I haven't been fired so far, so all has been good. And then go into, well, what am I doing now? What have I learned? And then to a couple of like real things that we've done it from this journey. So my journey with AI, really jumping into it, started with curiosity. I'm the kind of person that if I see a big red button or hear about a mythical, all-knowing, godlike artificial intelligence, I'm gonna poke it. I'm gonna start playing around with it, and that was really where I started it, from a point of knowing absolutely nothing, just to seeing what I could do and playing around with it. I then hit a bit of a surprise, and it was like, oh gosh, this thing is really, really good. And I had a real distinctive moment, actually. I was trying to price some real niche legal liability policy that I'd never quite seen before. And I just asked the AI, well, how would you do it? What would you consider? I'd written a list of what I was going to do. And I got a list of about 8 things. And it came back with 10 things. And it got 2 things that I hadn't got. And I was like, wow. this is amazing. It knows all of these really brilliant things. So I then began to start to trust it more. But I then started to spot a little holes, a few mistakes. So I realized it knows a lot about everything, but it doesn't quite know everything. And you've got to work out what it knows. So I was playing around with it more and then started asking a few different topics. And it came to the conclusion that, to me, I always see that it has the collective knowledge of all second-year graduates in the country. It's got a lot of confidence, like all of those second-year graduates, but it doesn't quite know everything. And to me, that was a bit of concern, because you can't just take the answer, use it immediately, and just trust it. I had to begin to treat it like a colleague, treat it a different way, and try and work out, well, how do I get it to give me the right answer in a nice, safe environment? And the first thing was actually the way that I was communicating with it that I needed to change. And that was kind of like, that's when it began to click. I realized that actually I really needed to start treating it like a colleague, like a graduate, someone that I was working with. I needed to make my prompts, I need to tell it what to do in a much clearer fashion. So I always, on almost every time, the first thing I do is, if I'm doing a regular piece of work, I'll always tell it it's a British actuary. Because that gives me a few things. It's a little more cautious in the way that it gives me answers. It sometimes gives me limitations, and it will always give me the answer in British English. I always give it a clear objective. I always try and tell it, this is what we're trying to achieve, as you would want with anyone else. So that way we're along the same path. I always tell it who the audience is, and give it the odd constraint of what it is and isn't allowed to do. And if I've got any data sources, anything that it wants to physically reference, I'll give it that. And that, to me, began to get those better and better answers just by giving it those clear tasks. And like that second-year graduate, you don't want to give it the whole everything. Go away, do this huge big task. You've got to start it slow and gentle. To me, it was just give it small chunks. What are the bits that I can reasonably do? What are the bits that actually this will accelerate the things that I could help with? So you just ask it to do little bits of idea generation, get it to peer review an email, get it to make some suggestions, go, well, I've got this, but I want to put it in this context, or I have something that's quite generic, but I really want to make it industry specific. And then when it comes in, review it. Break it down what you're giving it into those smaller tasks, and often it's not going to come up with the right answer. And you've got to go back and go, hey, that's definitely wrong, or can you tweak it in this way? And iterate what you're doing. Never really let it become a black box. Always treat it the same as you would as if it was an actual person that you're kind of looking after and guiding. And that was, with those principles, that was where we got to. We started to be able to do some really interesting things. Well, how do we're now using it to add value, to save time. We did a bit of a study internally of just how much time is it saving us, and we kind of estimate it's saving us about 8 hours a week per person for those kind of early adopters. I find that I'm personally getting so much more done in my day just because I'm able to use it just as an accelerator rather than to replace things. And that was great, but how do we get it to add more value to the industry, to the work, to insurance and what we're doing? What can we kind of unlock with this increased efficiency? And kind of one of those simple tasks that we started to do is that often you can get bordereaux filled with hundreds, if not thousands of claims with all of these claims descriptions. And what often happens is someone takes that total number of 1,000 claims and puts it in as one claim, and doesn't really look at the underlying exposure, because no one has the time, the ability, and the added value of paying someone to read through these 1,000 claims, categorize them, understand them, is just, it's an impossible task. It's a waste of time and money. But we can train the bot to do something really simple. Just read through those claims descriptions and categorize them. So you actually now know in your multi-line casualty book of business that 20% of your claims are motor, 20% are medical malpractice, 30% are legal, 30% a legal liability. And then you can start to be able to do analysis and start to be able to play with data that you've never really been able to play with before, because it's never been accessible, which then allows me to be able to do more. Well, how is this massive book of business changing year on year? New piece of analysis we weren't able to do. And don't get me wrong, it doesn't get it right every time. And we were finding actually it was about 90% right. And that was good enough. We weren't making big business decisions on it. And then we were refining it. And then actually it was Natalie, who spoke just before me, who gave a really, really good suggestion when we last spoke about actually what you can do is you can use multiple AIs just to check. And when all three of them get it right, actually, you're off to the races. You've got much greater degrees of accuracy. But yeah, I think the theme of what I'm trying to say is take it slow and gentle, take it like a person, break it down what it's doing into those short, very specific tasks. Don't ask the world from it because you're not going to get it back. But you can train it to do those really, really specific things and always review it as you would a person. Nowadays, I've got prompts that I can just press go and it knows that it's going to be reviewing email, or it's going to be telling me about a certain particular bit of capital modeling that I can ask questions, or that I'm going to be submitting a contract's term and conditions, and I can ask very specific questions and it can immediately find me the page number out of 100 pages of legal documentation. So that way I can just verify it. Yeah, that was my story and kind of how we got to where we are today. I think I'll pass back to you, John, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I mean, one of the things you mentioned when we met last week, Jake, was that example of that you actually ask it to you've actually created a profile that it is to answer me like an actuary or with a role. Can you maybe expand a little bit more on that, because I thought that was a really interesting this idea of actually you become you've actually created an AI bot almost that is mimicking yourself, so that it's going to come back with a tone of voice that you can really understand.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as part of one of these prompts or bots that we've kind of created and playing around with it, I wanted it to be able to help kind of either write emails, review reports, but I found that immediately it was coming back with very kind of American language. It was coming back with things that were very flowery, and it was adding things that I'd never said and kind of embellishing what I was saying and adding a bit too much drama. And I already had enough drama in there that I didn't really need that extra level of embellishment. So as part of that prompt engineering, as part of that background information that it's working on, you start to tell it, you are a British actuary. You can only use the information that has been provided. You must adhere to these standards. You must ensure that when you're talking, that actually you can't use technical actuarial concepts. Everything must be explainable to another, to basically to either a layperson or to an executive. And that's part of the reason why I will always tell its audience. So something what I quite like to do is so sometimes I will tell it that actually write it in the same language and tone as the Financial Times, because I find the Financial Times is really, really good at telling you these really big, complicated things, but it turns out everybody can pick up a copy and absolutely read it. But as part of this, it's training it and telling it to work in a certain way and just getting it to mimic my language styles. And actually, to get it to mimic my language styles, I actually gave it a whole host of emails that I've written and said, tell me about this language style. What are the key things? And then it told me about my language style, that it was formal, professional, and there's one point it's eloquent. So now that's all part of my prompt, that I got it to tell me about my language style, so I can then tell it what to do with my language style.
Could somebody go on?
Somebody's on mute, not on mute. Is someone okay? carry on, Jake. I think they've gone off. They've muted themselves now.
I think I was largely there with it. I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we're getting some good questions coming in. I've got to keep those coming. Those questions. Right. So I've got a few to get us going. All right. Here's the first one. So it's from well, someone who submitted. I don't actually have who did it, but who sent it. But it's this. I've got 15 vendors in my inbox this week, all claiming their AI is transformative. How did you figure out which one to actually try first, or did you ignore them all? Who wants to start that?
I can pick this up, as I probably should have covered it more eloquently in my cutting through the noise bit. Like really, you can actually put pretty simple tests in. It depends on what you're trying to do. So I'd focus on what your output is, and then I would work out what tests to provide a subsection of those to do. That the challenge you've got is you've got a whole environment of companies that are putting services around someone else's technology. So actually, you probably want to work out which ones you can use, and then which ones are using the service you can. And like practically a work process, if you don't have like an AI policy or an approved LLM list, that's probably a thing that I would get your techie teams to put together, and then that will filter a lot of those guys out, because you may have a view on Anthropic where you don't like that LLM and you don't find it secure enough, but you're happy with the OpenAI stuff. But generally, I'd focus on an output, and if it's easy and it will transform your life, you can set them all a very simple test and then conduct it in a pretty quick way, and then that will self-filter, because if they can't deliver it or want more information, then they're
okay. Anything else, Natalie, Jake? Anything to add to that? Or I think my my reaction is to just delete them. Anyway, I've given up with I actually went into the I think it was Tesco's or one of the supermarkets anyway, and I was looking for a new toothbrush. And it told me that it was AI powered, and I just thought, okay, this is just an abuse of the word AI. But excellent. Okay, so let's.
I just jump in just a second. I think just to echo what Ed was really saying is that there were a set number of large language models, and a lot of these companies that are advertising AI, they are just using that model as part of their service. And we've seen some demonstrations, and people have come to us, and really we were starting to ask questions. Well, what are you actually doing with the AI? And often it was they just had a chatbot in the background that was running really, really simple questions. We actually saw a vendor, and actually what they were showing us, they were saying they were using AI, and actually they were only just starting to build it as well. So everybody seemed to jump on this really, really big hype train, but they're all doing very, very similar things. And actually, when you begin to dig into it, a lot of what they're doing is actually really, really simple and not that complex. So it's just asking a few questions, and you can kind of get there, because they're all using pretty much the same tools that we have available to us, just out there, your ChatGPTs and your other large language models, if that's fair.
Okay. Right. Next question. This is from Paolo, which is saying, when people are trying to rebuff AI, they talk about examples of ChatGPT not being able to do maths. So how can it be like a second-year graduate, even though the point of LLMs is not to do maths? How do you handle those colleagues who are finding the pointless examples of what it can't do?
So yeah, that's an entire omission. It's like a second-year graduate who's never done maths in its entire life. It is a large language model, and it's really, really good at languages. There isn't a computational calculation engine in there for anything that involves maths. There are wonderful tools and wonderful stuff out there that does all of the maths in the background, and it's about chaining actually what is the large language model good at, giving it those short specific tasks that you can then chain with your maths and your calculation tools. And I think it's very, very easy to go into a large language model and to give you a wrong answer. And that can be a little discouraging. And I think that gives a lot of rise to your naysayers of going, oh, look, I've asked it this and it gave me this, or it has some censored information. But realistically, it's how you're using it. It's a case of making sure that when you're using it, you are checking what it's saying, and it's part of a structured kind of process. There's the same kind of structured process that you would use if you were outsourcing to a third-party vendor in a foreign country. You have structures, you have controls, you have those peer review processes all kind of built in there. But no, it can't do everything, because it certainly can't do maths, which certainly makes also me feel a little safer about my job for now.
Okay, Natalie, yeah.
I also think it's fair to say that it has got a lot better at doing maths recently. So the newest model is actually a lot better at doing it, because they do have a whole host, like a whole team of moderators now within ChatGPT who go through and will ask these maths questions, get a wrong answer, and then will correct it. And then it will learn from that what the correct answer is. So I think it actually has got a lot better recently. So maybe that's something to say to those colleagues who are naysayers.
Don't rest too easy, Jake.
Yeah.
Also, I think like AI becomes a bit of a catch-all. So I think sometimes people forget that like there are tools that are better suited for this stuff. I had a debate a few weeks ago about doc comparisons and using an LLM versus something else to compare last year's insurance document to this year's document. And you kind of think, why would you use AI to do that when you can literally just do it, use a scanner that kind of will check factually what's different? I think you can use, there are lots of tasks where you can use AI to do it. It will lack accuracy. And I think aligning what you're trying to do with the correct tool, and whether that is AI, is the right thing. So I think the naysayers are probably looking for reasons not to adopt, and that's fine. But I think actually kind of having a more of an intelligent view of kind of what tools you're going to apply to what tasks, I think helps cut through that noise, because you're not setting it up to fail.
Okay, right. Question for all. This is from Jacob. I don't have Jacob's surname here. It is how much better is the version of you without AI on a scale of 1 to 5 before and after?
I can go. So
Okay.
I don't think I'm necessarily better at my job, but I think what the biggest thing is time efficiencies. So because it's obviously built, like these models are built on information we already have online, I'm sure if I spent a very long time Googling and going through forums, I would find the same information somewhere, but it would take me a long time. So I think in terms of quickness, I was probably a 2, and now I'm about a 4, I'd say. But in terms of ability, I think the gap is slightly smaller. But yeah.
Ed?
I'd echo this. I'm probably better at being better. I'm more informed generally. I can get stuff done quicker. I don't spend ages kind of drafting templates and things like that if I'm setting up functional things. So in terms of how I use it, I'm just basically using it in my day-to-day professional life to kind of obtain information and kind of do gimme work that I'm not adding value to. So I guess you get more of 5 Ed and less of 2 Ed, just because I've got more time to be a 5.
Okay, and Jake?
Yeah, it's the value that I'm getting out of it is it's that idea generation, those extra few points, the little bit of learning. But realistically, to echo both Ed and Natalie, it's a massive time saver. I'm able to get so much more done. So as an individual, my work is probably it's to the same level, but I'm able to do so much more of it. So value to my employer is up.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think most people would say it's got to be if it was 3, you're at 4.5 maybe. If you're using it, and the more you use it, the more you see that you can other ways in which you can use it. I mean, I think this is one of the most disruptive technologies that certainly happened in my lifetime. Right, let's right, here's a question. Of course, there is ChatGPT and Copilot, but what other AI engines, apps can people recommend, and what are they good for? Can the panel please give some examples why and when they use different apps for certain tasks? Right, okay. Who's going to go first on this?
I'm happy to pick it up. I guess
Okay, go on.
There's probably a good definitional thing where like an app is kind of a user interface to engage with the model, and then the models themselves are a separate thing. I guess the models, I don't know enough to know what's better or worse with all of them, but generally some favoring. In terms of apps, the ones that personally I like, so ChatGPT is an app, not the LLM, I guess, is just as a definitional thing. I like ChatGPT, and it kind of, I mentioned Perplexity before. Perplexity was like my kind of gateway drug into using kind of chatbots to do that. I find it great because I don't need to know what I'm doing. I just need to ask some information. In a professional context, Copilot, I do the same thing. So it's calling the same LLM, but essentially I can kind of do it on work mode or web mode. So I can interrogate information that exists confidentially within the organization and find stuff out, versus I can kind of interrogate the web. And that's kind of a safe, there's guardrails around kind of where my data goes. So I really like those two, but I'm using it just to give me information. There are lots of other tools that kind of, if you're asking to do it for you, and there's tons of vendors, and I can kind of talk about this a bit, but that's my preference.
Yeah, okay. Natalie?
I generally use ChatGPT most, just because within the app, there is lots of different model versions in there to do different things. So for example, there's even a prompt engineer in there, which you can use to help you generate better prompts if you want something very specific. So I use that most. If I was going to use other models such as Gemini, so Google Gemini, that would be if I was wanting to compare results between different models. And like sometimes we've used them recently where we'll have 3 different models and we'll ask it the same question, and if they all agree with each other, then we can be more certain of the outcome and we can progress with that. So we use it in that way. But when I'm just Googling, I've realized recently Copilot, or if I'm using Google Gemini, it just comes up with like those AI summaries at the top, which I find really useful. I love that. So yeah, that's what I use.
Okay, and Jake?
I'm probably, to be honest, I'm probably a little overly cautious. I only use the one provided, like, you know, I've used little bits, but use the ones that I have available to me internally, which is several. But it's a case of I will start with your ChatGPT and then kind of work down the list if something's not really giving me a satisfactory answer. But 99% of the time, ChatGPT is perfect. And also because I use the internal tools, it means that everything I say is locked down, everything I say is safe, everything is perfectly confidential, because I really wouldn't want to reveal a piece of information that's I don't, and I've got all my prompts saved there. So actually I was even recently planning a trip away, and I was asking a few questions, but I still used the internal one just as I was familiar with it. But I should go out on a limb and try more. I should press more of those big red buttons.
Yeah. No, nobody's mentioned Claude. I'm intrigued. No. Okay.
No,
I find that as a research tool is absolutely the tops. And the other one that I hear a lot about is Perplexity, because it gives you all the sources, which means that verifying it is useful. Any others? Right. What other questions have we got here? Wow. Okay. From Kevin Timms, not one for the small one. Where do you see the biggest gap between AI's potential in the London market and its actual day-to-day use. For example, adoption, innovation, and regulatory trust, etc. Whoa, okay. Jake?
I think the obvious one is the gap is decision making, right? So if you have an underwriter or a claims handler who make a specific decision and then someone disagrees with that decision, you can't send your AI tool into court for discovery or deposition or anything like that. That's the biggest hurdle, because a lot of the models aren't necessarily explicable in terms of how they got to the answer, and if you feed them the same question, you can get different answers. I think that's the thing where we have to acknowledge we're a regulated industry, so understanding where we apply the technologies and how we use it in sort of the actual day-to-day underwriting world is going to be really different. In terms of the efficiencies, I think everyone's on that journey. Everyone's doing really cool stuff. I think everyone's doing that thing, but that next quantum leap, there has to be some degree of understanding of how use of these tools in genuinely regulated activity is going to be treated by the regulator, and I think that's the biggest gap.
Is it the case that if you're a lead underwriter and you're signing off on, somebody has to be accountable for the decisions that have been made, right? I mean, if you've actually got a lead underwriter that gets so confident with AI that it's prepared to go with the decision it's done, is that should be good enough, shouldn't it? If the underwriters or not.
The challenge is just explaining your rationale as to why you made a decision, and I don't think your rationale can be like, we tested it loads and I liked it. I don't know how it made this decision.
No. But what I mean is that a person is signing off on saying, I am responsible for this answer, or I'm responsible for these accounts, and I'm responsible for these methodologies. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, there's, by the looks of things, not. But I just feel that I'm a great believer that if the way that AI will get adopted is by actually having people who are AI powered, well, AI assisted, and they're actually signing off on, they're actually signing off, they're being accountable for what actually comes out at the end of it. And if that is the case, then that should lead to a lot more adoption. Yeah, maybe.
So I was having this conversation, a bit of this conversation this morning, and I feel like most of us, certainly in an analyticsy kind of space, spend 80–90% of our time trying to get to the answer, and then getting to a point, and then the 10–20% of the time that's left over actually interrogating the results. The AI will hopefully accelerate things such that actually you spend 20% of the time getting to the results, but that leaves you that 80% of the time getting to the answer, because certainly in actuarial is really quite regulated. Certainly the decision that we make, it is the actuary's decision that makes it. It is the underwriter's decision to make it. It is just a tool that is there to help you get to better, quicker, more impactful decisions, but they are still ultimately your decisions, and you have to be comfortable with how and why you got to those decisions, which is so sources information. Like I could go in and ask it, well, what type of curve should I use for these kinds of data, and it'll give me a suggestion, but ultimately I'm still picking that curve in the end, and we can't use it to create a big black box, because that would cause a huge host of problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Right, time's moving on. We have actually, having asked, we've got lots of questions that we're not going to be able to get through in this session. But to draw the Q&A to a close, I said that, right, I'll ask each panelist to describe their 3 top moments, okay, that provided them with the most insight and learning about how to get to grips with AI. Ed, do you want to have a go with that?
Yeah, I'll probably just give one top moment, because I think there was one that kind of it's impacted a lot of stuff, but broadly it was a stupid one, really, where it was broadly getting a demonstration of how we've integrated an LLM into one of our processes here, and talking with the team, and they showed me the prompt that drove this process, and it was pages long. And then that just blew my mind in the sense that I was still kind of having fun, just going, oh, like pretend you work for McKinsey and give me a strategic plan for this, and kind of all this kind of stuff. Whereas actually suddenly you realize when you're controlling the inputs, the context, the outputs, and kind of disregarding certain information, it completely changed how I think of how you really productionize this stuff and how you interrogate. And even myself, like in my stupid ways, like I was used to giving it a role and some context, but the level of context and the level of role, the level of tone, like Jake was talking about, all of those things, suddenly kind of it opened up my thinking in terms of, okay, I can actually interact with this completely differently. And it was just a little demonstration of kind of when you've got a data scientist controlling both the input and the output and making sure that those both are consistent, is that to me was my biggest moment.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, Natalie.
Yeah, so my biggest moment, I say it's more of a phase, but basically before a couple years ago, I think my small team were probably the only users of it, and we weren't using it really loudly. We weren't like telling lots of people about it. And then within the last year, we had a new CIO arrive, and she was a big advocate for using it in day-to-day life. She often shows what she's doing with it and how she's using it to draft things. And I've seen a real shift completely in the company of people being a lot more open to using it, a lot more. They talk about it, they share hints, they share what they're doing, and we're starting to use it a lot more like collaboratively with the whole company. So I think that's the really big thing, is it stopped being this sort of shameful secret to be doing privately, but it's now like a company-wide like initiative, which is really great.
Excellent. And Jake?
For me, the top three moment was actually seeing it being productionized as kind of part of a tool, seeing it doing a small task 1,000 times over and over again, and then that answer being fed into like just the regular kind of IT systems, or a regular piece of machine learning, or a regular kind of system and flow, and actually going, wow, with this you can get it to unlock, so like you can see it physically as part of a process. It's not just this standalone thing. It's chained. It can now do this really, really amazing, wonderful stuff in a really, really quite safe environment where it's doing really specific things. And then when you get to the end result, you've just unlocked, for us, it was unlocking data from like thousands of pages and thousands of boxes of noise, of free text, and then suddenly going, wow, there's now so much more that we can do with this. We can now, like, as an insurer, we can now get ahead of other people, because we can analyze things that we've never been able to analyze before. And me being an actuary, being given even more data was really exciting.
Okay. Right. So we'll end it, draw this to a close. We've got so we've had three people bearing all three different challenges, all started exactly where you are. Ed, Natalie, and Jake have all shown exactly how you can work that start beginning with AI and then start to realize the promise of it. And actually, it's all about doing it. It's all about actually getting your hands into the rich, loamy detail, actually playing with it firsthand. That's the best way, I think, without doubt, to actually learn this thing. So here's the challenge, okay? And this is totally an open invitation. But what we would like to do is ask everyone here to spend 4 hours over the next month actually using AI, okay? So not reading about it, not researching it, but actually using it, okay? It's up to you, entirely up to you how you structure those 4 hours. It could be on personal stuff, it could be on low risk work, it could be real work, or it could be push your boundary stuff. you decide, then we will invite you to join us for a follow-up clinic in about a month's time. Same panel, same format, but this time we're answering questions based on what you've actually learned from your 4 hours. The questions will be about real situations that you've faced rather than theoretical concerns. Three things before we close. Three items to go away with. One is the best time to start was last month. The second best time is today. Second, on perfectionism, is just fear wearing a suit. Start with throwaway work, so stuff that you do you could just experiment with. 3, stop reading, start testing. 15 minutes trying beats 2 hours of research. Okay, so the webinar ends here. Your journey starts now. Over to you, Patrick. You're on mute.
Apologies, I should have sorted that one out before. Well, thank you very much, John. Thank you very much to all of the panelists. And thank you very much to all of you who joined us today. I really hope you found this session insightful. As John mentioned, we'll follow up with a challenge as well as potentially more events around the practical use of AI. What I am presenting here is the QR code for joining our mailing list. So please feel free to scan it, join our mailing list, so that you can receive directly information from the activities of our working group. Other than that, I wish everybody a great day and see you soon. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much.